Rhind Lashari War, 1582 to 1612. In the soil of Balochistan, from ancient times, lies a tale buried deep. A tale written not with ink, but with the clash of swords, rivers of blood, and the colors of loyalty and betrayal. This is the story of the Rhind Lashari War, 1582 to 1612. A war that was not just a battle of steel and gunpowder, but one fueled by family honor, tribal traditions, and the fire of revenge. This war lasted for 3 decades. It did not just shake 2 tribes, but it shook the foundation of the Baloch way of life and changed their destiny forever. Why did this war happen? This is the question. Why did the Rhind and Lashari become thirsty for each other's blood? Tradition says that everything began with friendship and respect. The Rhind tribes and the Lashari tribes were once allies, part of the same Baloch union. In the beginning, they stood side by side, sharing joys and sorrows. But then, a small matter turned into fire. That small matter was a murder and a demand for revenge. It is said that someone from the Lashari family harmed a member of the Rhind clan. The Rhind took this as an insult, a wound on their honor, and they demanded blood in return. In Baloch culture, revenge was not just an emotion, it was a duty. Without honor, life was incomplete, and to protect that honor, spilling rivers of blood was accepted. Who were the leaders? The Rhind tribe was led at that time by Chakar, one of the most famous and brave commanders of Baloch history. His courage, his determination, and his wisdom made him the leader of the Baloch nation. On the other side, the Lashari tribe was led by Gwahram Lashari, equally brave, equally great, and a protector of his people's honor. What began as small disputes slowly grew larger. The Rhind believed the Lashari had insulted them. The Lashari insisted the Rhind were attacking them without reason. The first colors of war. In the early days, the war was limited to small clashes. Sometimes the Rhind raided a village. Sometimes the Lashari struck back. But as time passed, the bodies began to pile up. Blood was answered with blood, and then came a moment when both sides decided this war would not end with just 1 or 2 lives. It would be settled in a great battle. Who was right, who was wrong? If you think about it, the question arises, was this war even necessary? Could one murder, one insult, or one matter of honor really be worth 30 years of endless death? The Rhind claimed they were right, because life had no meaning without honor. The Lashari claimed they were right, because false accusations had been thrown upon them, and they were only defending their dignity. And this is the true essence of the war. Who was right and who was wrong? Even today, history carries this question without an answer. What happened next? This was only the beginning. In the next part, we will see how this small spark of conflict turned into the greatest and most tragic war in the history of Balochistan. A sea of swords, a river of blood, and a tale of loyalty and betrayal. Everything is yet to come. The war had begun with a small spark, but now that spark had turned into a flame, burning through the deserts and mountains of Balochistan. Between the Rhind and the Lashari, it was no longer about 1 or 2 murders. This had become a war of honor, of tribal tradition, and of an enmity that stretched across years. 2 commanders, 2 ways. On one side stood Chakar Rhind, whose identity was his brave heart, his leadership, and his power. Chakar was not just a warrior, but a wise commander who built strategies. His thought was that the Lashari must be crushed in one great battle, so that their necks would bow in defeat. On the other side was Gwahram Lashari, equally courageous. But his thinking was different. He believed that the strength of the Rhind could only be broken by attacking them from every side with small strikes, infiltration, raids, sudden ambushes. One side believed in strategy and order, the other in the guerrilla way of fighting. And so, both commanders prepared the battlefield with their own philosophies. The chain of blood and revenge. The war first began with small clashes. Sometimes the Rhind troops attacked Lashari caravans. Sometimes the Lashari burned Rhind fields and villages. Every day, bodies fell, and with every body came a new promise of revenge. In Baloch tribal culture, revenge was sacred. If the Lashari killed one Rhind, the Rhind would kill 2 of them for honor. Then the Lashari would spill even more blood in return. This chain grew and grew until both tribes became thirsty for each other's blood. The first great battle. Tradition says the first great battle happened in the plains of Kachi. Soldiers on both sides stood behind their leaders. The dust rose, the sword shone, and arrows rained down. The Rhind were proud of their strength and bravery, and the Lashari fought with loyalty and the oaths they had sworn. The clash went on for hours. The ground turned red with blood. In the end, so many bodies had fallen on both sides that it was impossible to decide who had won, who had lost. But one thing was clear, this war was not going to stop. Both sides now knew that this was no longer a mere fight. This was a war that would last until the end. Friendship, betrayal, and alliances. In the middle of the war, it was not just swords that decided the future. Tribes changed sides, some became traitors, some formed new friendships. Some Rhind leaders were tempted by the Lashari to join their side, while some Lashari leaders were lured by the Rhind with promises of wealth and honor. During this time, one famous incident took place. It is said that some close men of Mir Chakar were unhappy with his leadership. They thought of joining the Lashari to build their own power. But Mir Chakar, with his wisdom and timely action, caught the traitors. Their end was such that the entire tribe learned a lesson. The one who does not stand with his leader does not live. The blood of Baloch land. This war was not only between the Rhind and Lashari. It colored all of Balochistan in its shades. Every village, every settlement, every tribe was touched by it. Children were orphaned, women became widows, and the old spent their final days in fear of the enemy. A famous tale says that one woman sent both her sons to battle. When both were martyred, she wept and said, "Our land demands blood, and we will not give our land empty hands." These words capture the true spirit of the war, to sacrifice everything for honor and for the rise of the Lashari. During the war, the Lashari proved their strength many times. Gwahram Lashari's guerrilla tactics worked like magic, and the Rhind were forced to retreat in several battles. The Lashari became famous for their courage and loyalty. There came a time when people said, "The time of the Rhind has ended. The time of the Lashari has begun." But Mir Chakar Rhind was not the kind of leader who would accept defeat so easily. The answer of the Rhind gathered their strength again. Mir Chakar began training his forces in new ways. He countered the guerrilla style of the Lashari with strong strategy and strict discipline. Then came another great battle. This time, Mir Chakar encircled the Lashari in such a way that cracks appeared in their lines. Many Lashari leaders were killed, and the direction of the war changed once again. 30 years of war. But this war was not one that could end in just one or two battles. It dragged on for 30 years. Every year brought new clashes, new murders, new traitors, and new heroes. Sometimes the Rhind rose up, sometimes the Lashari gained the upper hand. And every time, new blood was shed and new stories were written. Who was right, who was wrong? Hearing all this, even today, the question arises, were the Rhind right to fight for revenge and honor? Or were the Lashari right for refusing to accept humiliation? The Rhind would say, "Without honor, we are nothing." The Lashari would say, "We will never endure humiliation." So both were right in their own eyes and wrong in the eyes of the other. What happened next? The real face of this war was still to come. The climax remained, the moment when swords decided everything, when the destiny of the Rhind and Lashari was sealed, and when history wrote down who won and who lost. The decision of the swords. For 30 years, every day of the war was filled with blood, revenge, and destruction. But every war has a climax, and the climax of the Rhind-Lashari War was the battle that people still remember to this day, the greatest clash in the plains of Kachi. Mir Chakar Rhind and Mir Gwahram Lashari both decided that now the war would end with one final encounter. In other words, either their honor would survive, or everything would turn to dust. It was morning. The desert dust rose high. The shouts of soldiers echoed. The armies on both sides spread out like oceans. The Rhind warriors polished their swords, while the Lashari fighters struck their arrows against the ground to make thunder, as if to scare their enemies. This was not just a fight between two leaders. It was a fight between two families, two generations, and two ways of life. Rivers of blood. When the battle began, the earth shook. Swords clashed with swords, arrows rained, and the thunder of horses filled the land. Soldiers fell, rose again, and shouted the names of their chiefs. The Rhind fought with discipline, while the Lashari fought with madness and passion. On both sides, the piles of bodies grew higher. Some were mothers' sons, some women's husbands, some children's fathers. All fell on the earth. A famous tale says that in this battle, the land of Balochistan turned red. So much blood was spilled that the soil itself lost its true color. The leaders faced each other. Then came the moment both sides had waited for. Mir Chakar and Mir Gwahram stood face to face. Both raised their swords and attacked one another. Tradition says that their clash was not only of steel, but of honor and emotion. Every strike could have decided the war, but both were equally brave. For hours their duel continued. At last, there came a moment when Mir Chakar, with his strategy and cunning, managed to wound Mir Gwahram. But the Lashari soldiers rushed forward and saved their chief, and the battle turned even bloodier. Betrayal and twist. History tells us that the tide of the war shifted because of betrayal. Some Rhind traitors went over to the Lashari side. With the help of these traitors, the Lashari gained an advantage. There came a time when the Rhind lines began to break. But Mir Chakar, with his courage and wisdom, once again held his army together. He told his men, "This war is not of swords alone, it is of the heart. If your heart is strong, then your sword will also be strong. Hearing these words, the Rind soldiers rose again with renewed fire. The final stage. In the climax, the battle grew so terrifying that both leaders realized there would be no true winner. Everywhere, heaps of dead bodies lay. One tale says that in this war, both tribes lost more than half of their strength. In the end, mere Chakar Rind gained the upper hand. But it was a victory that brought no joy. For as many corpses as lay on the Lashari side, just as many lay on the Rind side. The victory was empty, a hollow triumph that only deepened wounds and extended the chain of blood. Aftermath, the wounds remained. After the war, neither the Rind truly won, nor the Lashari truly lost. Both tribes were left broken. The power and pride they once had were gone forever. Baloch tradition says, this war broke the heart of the Baloch. They fought for honor, but in return they lost their strength and their unity. It is said that mere Chakar realized after the war that true honor does not come from mountains of corpses. And the Lashari too learned that humiliation can never truly be wiped away by the sword. But sadly, these truths were understood only after generations had already been sacrificed. Who was right, who was wrong? Even today, history cannot answer this question. Were the Rind right or the Lashari? If you look at the Rind, they said, without honor, life has no meaning. If you look at the Lashari, they said, to endure humiliation is a sin. The truth is, both were right in their own eyes, and both were wrong in the other's eyes. And that is why this war dragged on for so long. Legend and story. In Baloch culture, the tale of this war is still told today. In poetry, in songs, in stories, the names of the Rind and Lashari echo. This war became a lesson that fighting for tribal honor may be a passion, but its end is always blood and destruction. The elders say, a war should not only be for land and honor, but also for wisdom and peace. Today's lesson. The Rind Lashari War gives us a lesson. Revenge never brings happiness, it only brings ruin. Honor can be protected with the sword, but true honor lives in peace and in dignity. This war is more than 400 years old, but its lesson is still alive today. Even now, when we fight in the name of honor, revenge, and tribe, we should remember the Rind Lashari War and understand that the real victory lies in peace. The war that raged from 1582 to 1612 was one of the bloodiest wars in Baloch history. It changed the Baloch culture forever. Both leaders, Mir Chakar Rind and Mir Gwahram Lashari, are remembered to this day for their courage and sacrifices. And this war always leaves us with one question. Is honor built by blood or by peace?